Trina Lawson had barely managed to lower herself onto the couch when the doorbell rang. Her newborn twins were asleep in matching bassinets beside the window. 4 days earlier, she'd been in the maternity ward. The plastic hospital wristband was still around her wrist because she'd been too exhausted to cut it off. She opened the door expecting a meal delivery. Instead, she found her husband, Ethan. Standing beside him was his father, Victor Ashford. And beside Victor stood a woman, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. Victor didn't smile. "May we come in?" Without waiting for permission, he stepped inside. The woman followed. Ethan never met Trina's eyes. Victor glanced toward the sleeping Bobbies before calmly saying, "Trina, I'd like you to meet Claire." Claire offered an awkward smile. "I'm Ethan's partner." The words landed harder than the stitches Trina was still recovering from. Before she could speak, Victor laid 2 folders on her dining table. One was labeled Divorce Petition Asterisk. The other was much thicker. Victor pushed it toward her. Inside is an offer worth $18 million. Trina stared at him, convinced she'd misheard. Victor opened the folder himself and slid the contract across the table. "You sign today," he said evenly, "and you leave this marriage with $18 million. She turned another page. The payment wasn't for silence. It wasn't a settlement. It was in exchange for something else. Her breathing slowed. Every page repeated the same condition, in different legal language. She would permanently surrender every parental right to her twin daughters. No custody. No visitation. No future contact. Victor folded his hands together, as though he were negotiating a business acquisition. "The Ashford family needs heirs," he said. "Children raised inside our family, not by someone ordinary." Trina looked toward Ethan. He still wouldn't look at her. Instead, he quietly said, "This is the best solution for everyone." "For everyone," she whispered. Claire lowered her eyes, clutching the flowers tighter without saying a word. Victor continued, as if discussing quarterly earnings. "You're on maternity leave. You have no income, no influential family. If this reaches court, you'll spend years fighting lawyers you can't afford." He leaned closer. "Take the money, build yourself a new life." Silence filled the room. One of the Bobbies stirred softly before settling again. Trina slowly picked up the contract. She read every page. She asked no questions. She argued over nothing. Finally, she signed where Victor indicated. Victor allowed himself the smallest smile. Claire released a long breath. Across the table, Ethan looked almost relieved. No one noticed Trina quietly folding one duplicate copy and slipping it beneath the blanket wrapped around one of her sleeping daughters. Victor gathered the signed papers. "Excellent," he said. "Our security team will return tonight to bring the girls to the estate. You should be gone before then." Without another word, the 3 of them walked out. The front door closed. The house became completely still. Trina stood motionless for several seconds. Then she walked to the nursery. She looked down at her daughters. "This isn't over," she whispered. Hours later, long after darkness settled outside, Victor's security convoy pulled into the driveway. They entered the house, with legal documents ready to complete the custody transfer. The nursery door stood open. The bassinets were empty. Every baby supply was gone. So was Trina. So were the twins. And the $18 million had disappeared with her. Just before sunrise, Victor's phone rang. He answered impatiently. The trembling voice on the other end managed only one sentence. "Sir, something has gone horribly wrong." Victor Ashford lowered the phone slowly, his expression hardening. "What do you mean they're gone?" "The house is empty, sir," the head of security replied. "Mrs. Lawson took the twins. The cash transfer cleared before we arrived." Victor ended the call without another word. He turned toward Ethan. "Find her." Ethan grabbed his keys without hesitation. Claire watched the exchange from the hallway, uneasy. "They can't have gone far," she said. Victor didn't answer. He was already calling airport contacts. Within minutes, his security division had spread across the city. Private airfields, hospitals, hotels, train stations, rental agencies, every Ashford property. Victor wanted every place checked before sunrise. Miles away, Trina drove through the darkness with both Bobbies sleeping peacefully in specially fitted infant seats. She wasn't speeding. She wasn't crying. She wasn't looking over her shoulder every few seconds. She followed the route exactly as she had practiced. Every turn had been planned. Every stop had already been considered. She glanced into the rearview mirror. Both girls remained asleep. "Just a little farther," she whispered. Her GPS wasn't leading her home. It was guiding her somewhere Victor had never heard of. The quiet drive reminded her of conversations she'd tried to dismiss during her pregnancy. Victor had never spoken about the twins like grandchildren. "They'll carry the Ashford legacy. Our heirs. Our future." Never once had he called them simply Bobbies. At first, she'd assumed he was excited. Then his language became stranger. "They'll eventually understand their responsibilities. They'll belong where they can be properly raised." Each remark left her unsettled. Whenever she tried discussing it with Ethan, he brushed it aside. "That's just how Dad talks." But Trina noticed something Ethan refused to see. Victor never asked how she was recovering. He asked about the pregnancy, the birth date, the delivery plans, the legal paperwork. Never her. Always the Bobbies. Several months earlier, Victor had invited them to dinner at the Ashford estate. Halfway through dessert, he produced another stack of documents. "They're standard estate papers," he said casually. "It'll simplify future inheritance." He handed the pen directly to Trina. She skimmed the first page. Most of it seemed ordinary. But buried among the legal language were clauses referring to guardianship structures she didn't recognize. "I'd like my own attorney to review these," she said politely. Victor's smile disappeared for barely a second. "It isn't necessary. I'd still rather have someone explain them." Ethan sighed. "Trina, it's just paperwork." She closed the folder. "Then it can wait." Victor never argued. But neither did he hide his disappointment. That evening, as they prepared to leave, Trina realized she'd forgotten her phone inside the library. She walked back toward the room. Before opening the door, she heard Victor speaking sharply with two attorneys. "The timing has to happen before the inheritance activates." Another voice answered quietly. "She's becoming cautious." Victor replied. "Then make sure she stops asking questions." Trina froze. The conversation stopped the instant the floor creaked beneath her feet. When Victor opened the door moments later, he smiled as though nothing had happened. "There you are." The next morning, Trina scheduled a confidential meeting with an attorney who specialized in estate law. She expected reassurance. Instead, after reviewing copies of everything Victor had asked her to sign, the attorney became unusually serious. "You've done the right thing by refusing. Is something wrong with these documents?" "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But something about the timing concerns me." "So what do I do?" He slid the papers back across the desk. "You don't accuse anyone. You don't confront your father-in-law. And you don't let him know you're suspicious." Trina frowned. "Then what?" The attorney met her eyes. "If anyone intends to pressure you into signing away your rights, let them make the first illegal move." Now, months later, parked outside a quiet countryside property, Trina carefully carried one sleeping daughter inside while a trusted family friend took the other. The safe house was modest. Nothing about it suggested wealth, which was exactly the point. After settling both bobbies into temporary bassinets, Trina finally checked her phone. One encrypted message had arrived from her attorney. Only 3 words appeared on the screen. Everything has started. For the first time since Victor entered her home, she allowed herself a faint smile. Then her phone vibrated again. A new call. The screen displayed one name. Victor Ashford. Trina stared at Victor's name, flashing across her phone. The room was silent, except for the soft breathing of her daughters. She let it ring twice before answering. "Where are my granddaughters?" Victor asked without greeting. "They're my daughters," Trina replied calmly. His voice hardened. "Don't play games with me. I've already signed your agreement." "You signed because you understood your position." "No," she answered quietly. "I signed because I understood yours." A brief silence followed. Then Victor dropped any pretense of civility. "If you don't return by noon, I'll make sure you never work in another hospital." Trina didn't respond. "I'll freeze every account Ethan has access to." Still nothing. "I'll tell every court in this state that you kidnapped those children while mentally unstable after childbirth." Trina took a slow breath. "When you're finished, Victor, call your attorney." She ended the call. Victor slammed his phone onto the conference table inside Ashford Tower. She's making a terrible mistake. Within minutes, his public relations team was working. Statements were drafted. Television stations received anonymous tips. Online news outlets published breaking headlines. Billionaire family searching for missing newborn twins. Mother disappears after receiving multi-million-dollar divorce settlement. The story spread rapidly. Every report repeated the same narrative. A distressed father. Concerned grandparents. A financially unstable new mother who had vanished with 2 infants and millions of dollars. By lunchtime, social media had already chosen sides. Some called Trina selfish. Others accused her of exploiting the Bobbies for money. Former coworkers texted each other in disbelief. "Did you see the news? I can't believe she'd do something like this." One nurse who had worked beside Trina for years quietly turned off the television. "That doesn't sound like her." But her voice was drowned out by louder opinions. Exactly as Victor intended. At the safe house, Trina's attorney placed a tablet on the kitchen table. "You should see what they're saying." She looked only long enough to understand the strategy. "They're trying to force me into defending myself." "Yes. And if I respond, they control the conversation." She pushed the tablet away. "Then I won't." The attorney nodded approvingly. "Good. They're expecting panic. We're giving them patience." Across the city, Victor entered the executive boardroom expecting to reassure nervous directors. Instead, the atmosphere felt different. No one was speaking. The company's chief financial officer stood beside a stack of unopened envelopes. "What's this?" Victor asked. They arrived within the last 30 minutes. He opened the first envelope. His expression changed instantly. Emergency notice. The second, asset review. The third, regulatory preservation order. A fourth contained instructions preventing movement of funds connected to several Ashford holding companies. Victor looked around the room. "This is ridiculous." The CFO cleared his throat. "It isn't just one institution." Victor opened another envelope. Then another. Every major banking partner had issued similar notices. The family trust. Multiple subsidiaries. Investment accounts. Credit facilities. Everything significant had been frozen pending review. Board members exchanged uneasy glances. "When did this happen?" one director asked. "No one warned us." Victor turned sharply toward the legal department. "Fix it." The company's general counsel remained seated. I don't think we can. Victor stared at him. What do you mean? The attorney slid a confidential letter across the table. Someone submitted extremely detailed financial records to several regulators overnight. Victor scanned the first page. Only 3 people possessed information that precise. Himself, his private accountant, and... No. Ethan rushed into the boardroom moments later. Dad. Victor looked up. What now? Our accounts. I know. It's more than that. Ethan lowered his voice. They have copies of transactions dating back years. Victor's face tightened. That's impossible. Claire, who had followed Ethan upstairs, looked between them. I thought you said everything was protected. Victor snapped toward her. It was. She frowned. Then how does someone outside this building know where every account is? For the first time since Trina disappeared. Victor had no answer. Before anyone spoke again, the boardroom doors opened. 2 federal investigators stepped inside, accompanied by uniformed officers. The room fell completely silent. One investigator held up official credentials. Good morning. We're here regarding the Ashford family trust. The boardroom remained silent as the lead investigator placed a sealed folder on the polished conference table. Mr. Ashford, she said evenly, effective immediately, certain financial records and electronic communications must be preserved. No documents are to be altered or destroyed. Victor forced a smile. There must be some misunderstanding. We're simply following the evidence. The investigator's expression never changed. We have reason to believe significant information was lawfully submitted to multiple agencies overnight. Victor glanced toward his legal team. Tell them this is absurd. No one spoke. His general counsel finally broke the silence. I strongly advise full cooperation. Victor stared at him in disbelief. You're supposed to represent me. I'm representing the company. The distinction landed like a hammer. For the first time in decades, Victor realized the corporation was beginning to distance itself from him. Across town, Trina sat quietly beside the twins while her attorney reviewed the latest developments. They've frozen nearly every major transaction, he said. She nodded. And Victor. He spent the morning trying to identify who exposed him. He won't. The attorney smiled faintly. No. He opened a secure folder on his laptop. The escrow activated exactly as planned. Trina looked toward her sleeping daughters. So it's official. Yes. The evidence has now been released to every authority listed in the agreement. Months earlier, when Trina had first expressed concern about Victor's behavior, her attorney had advised her to prepare without confrontation. Every suspicious document Victor asked her to sign had been copied. Every conversation after that had been carefully documented. Every unexplained financial record she legally encountered while organizing insurance paperwork had been preserved. Instead of accusing Victor prematurely, they created a protected legal escrow. If anyone attempted to pressure her into surrendering her parental rights, the escrow would automatically release everything. Victor had unknowingly triggered it himself. Back at Ashford Tower, Ethan sat alone in his office when an assistant entered carrying a sealed overnight package. It was delivered by courier, she said. It says it's for you personally. After she left, Ethan opened it. Inside was a letter written in his late mother's handwriting. His hands immediately began to shake. Attached to it were certified copies of estate documents he had never seen before. He hurried downstairs into an empty conference room where the family's outside attorney was waiting. I don't understand any of this. The attorney adjusted his glasses before speaking carefully. Your mother amended portions of her estate shortly before her death. Why wasn't I told? Because the amendments were placed under sealed conditions. Ethan looked back at the papers. They mention the twins. Yes. They also reference controlling inheritance rights. The attorney nodded. Your daughters become the primary beneficiaries under a succession clause your father believed had been removed years ago. Ethan's face went pale. So, Dad knew. He appears to have discovered the clause months ago. And that's why he wanted Trina to give up custody. The attorney didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked one question. When did your father first begin insisting those children belonged at the Ashford estate? Ethan closed his eyes. He suddenly remembered every conversation, every rushed document, every discussion about guardianship. Every time Victor referred to the Bobbies as heirs instead of grandchildren. He whispered, almost to himself. He was never trying to protect them. He was trying to control what they inherited. Victor stormed into his private office moments later. His outside counsel was already waiting. You need to challenge the custody agreement immediately, Victor ordered. The agreement may not protect you. What do you mean, may not? The attorney placed the signed contract on the desk. This wasn't a standard settlement. It was executed 4 days after childbirth. Victor frowned. So a court may view it as coercion. Victor scoffed. She accepted $18 million. Which is precisely the problem. The attorney pointed to the payment authorization. A judge could reasonably conclude the money wasn't compensation. It was leverage. Victor's confidence began slipping. We'll argue she signed voluntarily. You can argue that. But the transfer itself is now evidence. Victor slammed his fist onto the desk. Then find her before this reaches court. We've tried. Try harder. At that exact moment, the office door opened without a knock. The same lead federal investigator stepped inside. 2 additional officers stood behind her. She held another official document. Mr. Ashford. Victor turned slowly. This isn't a good time. I'm afraid it is. She handed the notice to his attorney before speaking clearly enough for everyone in the room to hear. Based on newly released evidence, you are now the subject of a formal financial fraud investigation. The room fell silent. Victor looked from the investigator to his attorney, to Ethan, who could no longer meet his father's eyes. Everything Victor had built on secrecy had begun collapsing before a single courtroom hearing had even started. 3 weeks later, every seat inside the county courthouse was filled. Reporters lined the back wall. Attorneys occupied the front rows. Representatives from financial regulators quietly observed from one side of the room. When the courtroom doors opened, every conversation stopped. Trina walked in carrying one of her daughters, while a close family friend carried the other. She wore a simple navy dress. The hospital wristband was gone. The exhaustion remained, but so did her composure. Victor looked at her for the first time since she had disappeared. He expected fear. Instead, she calmly handed one baby to her friend before taking her place beside her attorney. The judge called the hearing to order. This matter concerns the validity of a postnatal custody agreement and related financial transactions. Trina's attorney stood. Your Honor, the evidence will show that my client was presented with divorce papers and an $18 million payment offered just 4 days after giving birth. The payment was conditioned upon permanently surrendering her parental rights. He placed several binders on the evidence table. We will also show this was not an isolated event. It was the final step in a deliberate plan. Victor's attorneys objected. The judge overruled them. Proceed. One document after another appeared on the courtroom screens. Copies of the divorce agreement, bank transfer records, audio recordings, emails, meeting schedules. Medical timelines. The sequence became impossible to ignore. Months before the twins were born, Trina had legally accessed insurance paperwork related to family trust benefits while completing maternity documentation. The records revealed financial inconsistencies she couldn't explain. Instead of making accusations, she consulted an estate attorney. He instructed her to preserve everything lawfully. Never alter a document. Never provoke Victor. Never reveal she was suspicious. Instead, prepare. Every unusual request Victor made afterward was documented. Every conversation that the law permitted her to record was preserved. Every legitimate financial record connected to the family trust was copied and placed into a protected legal escrow. The escrow contained one activation clause. If anyone attempted to coerce Trina into surrendering custody of her children, every document would automatically be released to designated attorneys, financial regulators, and banking authorities. Victor had unknowingly activated it himself. By insisting she sign away her daughters in exchange for $18 million, he triggered the very safeguard designed to expose him. The judge slowly closed the final binder. So the signature, Trina's attorney nodded, was never a surrender. It was the event that activated the escrow. And the children, they never legally changed custody. The required transfer procedures were intentionally left incomplete, exactly as the law requires before parental rights can be terminated. The courtroom fell silent. Victor finally stood. This is absurd. I offered her financial security. Trina looked directly at him. You offered to buy my children. Victor's face tightened. They were going to inherit everything. They are your family. They are not assets. Her voice never rose. You stopped seeing them as Bobbies before they were even born. Victor searched the courtroom for support. There was none. Even members of his own legal team avoided his eyes. Ethan slowly rose from his seat. His voice was barely audible. I knew Dad wanted custody. He swallowed hard. I told myself it was for the family's future. His eyes filled with tears as he looked toward Trina. I never asked what it would cost you. He turned toward the judge. I signed documents without reading them. I believed my father. I was wrong. Those words echoed through the courtroom. For the first time since the hearing began, Victor looked genuinely shaken. He reached toward Ethan. You don't know what you're saying. I do now. Ethan stepped back. I chose money over my own daughters. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Claire quietly stood from the gallery. Throughout the proceedings, she had listened as emails and internal messages revealed Victor had manipulated nearly everyone around him, including her. She placed the engagement ring Ethan had given her on the defense table. Without saying a word, she walked out of the courtroom. Neither Ethan nor Victor tried to stop her. The judge issued the ruling later that afternoon. The custody agreement was declared unenforceable. The payment was recognized as evidence supporting unlawful coercion rather than a valid settlement. Trina retained sole legal custody of both girls. Protective orders were entered preventing further intimidation. Separate civil proceedings for damages were authorized. Outside the courthouse, financial regulators confirmed that additional investigations into the Ashford family trust would continue. Within days, Ashford Holdings announced Victor's immediate removal as chairman. The board appointed interim leadership. Banks maintained restrictions on multiple accounts while investigators completed their review. Several longtime executives resigned. Investors distanced themselves. The empire Victor had spent decades controlling no longer answered to him. Ethan resigned from every executive position connected to the company. Because the sealed estate documents had finally been opened, he also lost the inheritance he once assumed was guaranteed. The controlling succession rights remained protected for his daughters under court supervision. For the first time, the Ashford fortune existed for their future, not Victor's control. Months passed. Trina returned to the neonatal intensive care unit, where she had spent years caring for fragile newborns. Only now, she worked with a new sense of purpose. Using the damages awarded through the civil case, she established a nonprofit organization that provided legal guidance and emergency support for mothers facing financial coercion during custody disputes. She never spoke publicly about revenge. Whenever reporters asked why she had remained silent for so long, she always gave the same answer. Because the truth doesn't become stronger by shouting. It becomes stronger when you can prove it. One quiet afternoon after finishing her shift, Trina picked up her daughters from daycare. They laughed as she carried them toward her car. There were no security teams, no cameras, no contracts waiting to be signed. Only a mother whose children had never been for sale. The $18 million remained locked in evidence records, untouched, a reminder that some offers reveal far more about the people making them than the people refusing them. The night Victor Ashford believed he had purchased 2 newborn heirs was the same night he unknowingly signed away the power he had spent a lifetime protecting.